Good morning, class, and welcome again to our course Lifespan Development. Today, we will be looking at an introduction to human development. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to answer the following questions. What fundamental issues of development have scholars addressed throughout history? What are the basic forces in the biopsychosocial framework? How does the timing of these forces affect their impact? What is a developmental theory? And what are the main points in the ecological systems approach? Before we can answer any objectives, we first have to figure out what the term human development means. At this time, you can pause your recording and you can think about when you hear the word human development, what comes to mind? Burke believed that human development was a field of study devoted to understanding constancy and change throughout the lifespan. Boydenby saw human development as the scientific study of age-related changes in behavior, thinking, emotion, and personality. And finally, we have Sigelman and Ryder, who stated that development can be defined as systematic changes and continuities in the individual that occur between conception and death, or from womb to the tomb. So we can see that human development is basically a field of study which looks at the behavior of individuals from birth until death. We see what changes can occur in the individual and also what things can remain the same. Within this field, scholars have addressed or have discussed three main issues in terms of how an individual develops. These issues are, we have the nature-nurture controversy. Secondly, continuity versus discontinuity. And finally, universal versus context-specific development. We will first look at the nature-nurture debate. Now, each theory of human development takes a stand on the question of what are the underlying causes of human development. And it is here that we have the nature-nurture issue. Now, some scholars believe that we are heavily influenced by nature. And by nature, we mean our biological forces really shape our development. So, heredity, and we get what we get from our parents. For example, genes. So, looking at an example, we have a parent passes on their looks, or a parent can pass on, according to this, if the parent is highly intelligent, the parent can pass on that to the child as well. On the other side of the coin, we have the nurture issue. Now, nurture believes that change is in response to the environmental factors in a child. So, for example, the physical conditions or the social conditions where the child lives. This is what influences development. Thus, they believe that the children really learn after birth. So let's look back at our example of a parent and how intelligence can be passed on. Now, we can look at how children acquire a language. According to the nurture debate, the deciding factor here would be teachers, parents, who have to teach the children a language now instead of it being biological or inbred into a child. I tend to believe, and many scholars also tend to believe, that we have a bit of both nature and nurture. But what do you think? Does nature or nurture influence our development? The second major issue in human development is continuity versus discontinuity. And here we have two simple pictures which illustrate this. Now our first picture we can see is of continuous development, and These theorists believe that development is a smooth, fluid, and continual process. Individuals gradually adjust the same types of skills that they always had in the beginning. Thus, according to this theory, if I was to look back at our previous example, if I was intelligent as a small child, I should still be intelligent as an adult. Now, in stark contrast to this, we have discontinuity in our second picture. It shows that new and different ways of understanding and responding to the world occur at different times. In other words, people can change drastically several times throughout their lifespan, and this is why we have the picture of steps. These theorists see development as taking place in stages. And finally, we have universal versus context-specific development. And as the name suggests, universal developmental theorists believe that developmental changes are common to all humans. In other words, there is only one path of development. Now, this is true for stage theorists, who usually look at changes as being universal or generally the same as individuals develop. So if their theory had from age 5 to age 12 doing a particular thing, they believe that this is so for the entire universe. And on the other hand, we have context specific change, which they believe that change is different from person to person, or change can be different from culture to culture, or developmental change can be different according to your social context or even your environment. In addition to the issues of development, scientists state that there are four main forces which can also impact development. Firstly, we have biological forces, which has to do with your genes, your brain, and your biology, which can affect development. Secondly, we have psychological forces, which looks at the mind. Cognitive, emotional, and personality factors can also influence behavior. Following from this, we have socio-cultural forces. For example, your environment or your culture or where you grew up, these can influence your behavior as well. And finally, lifestyle forces. The factor of age also has a major role in development. These factors tend to work together, which determines someone's path in life. In the next section of our study, we will examine developmental theories. And to introduce this, let's look and imagine the following scene. We have a young girl, let's call her name Gina, who is 3 years old. Now every morning, Gina goes to the kitchen and tries to make breakfast. Let's say a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And every day, peanut butter and jelly gets on the floor as well as all over her clothes. So when mom comes to the kitchen, she tries to help Gina to make the sandwich for her. And every time, Gina gets very angry and shouts, "No, let me do it myself." The questions we would ask ourselves is, why is Gina behaving in this manner? Has she learnt it? Now you may ask yourself, what does this have to do with development and developmental theories? Now these are the same types of questions that developmental psychologists try to answer. They formulate hypotheses to answer the why questions as they seek to understand and explain behavior that occurs throughout our lives. There are some general categories or families of theories which we can explore. And the first being the psychodynamic or the psychoanalytic theory, which looks introspectively. that people are mostly driven by motives and emotional conflicts. According to Burke in 2007, people move through a series of stages in which they confront conflicts between biological drives and social expectations. Proponents of this theory include Sigmund Freud and Erik Erikson. Following this, we have learning theories, which looks at development in the view of behavioral changes, which can be caused by one's environment. Thus, individuals learn from observing others or the people around them. Examples of theorists who support this view are B.F. Skinner with behaviorism and social learning theory of Albert Bandura. Then we come to cognitive development theory. Now, these theories focus on cognition or the mental aspects of development. Burke 2007 also states that according to the cognitive development theory, children actively construct knowledge as they manipulate and explore their world. One of the most famous proponents of this theory is Jean Piaget, whom we will study in a later module. And finally, we have the ecological and systems approach, which looks wholly at the impact of the environment on development. Urie Bronfenbrenner is the person who developed the ecological systems theory. And in the next slide, we will view a short video presentation explaining this theory.
Hi everybody, this is Professor Tannenbaum. I just wanted to take a few minutes today to give you a brief overview of Urie Bronfenbrenner's ecological theory. This is a theory that is described in your book, but it's kind of a brief description. And I really like to use this theory as a model as we go throughout the course, because it really is just such a good way of getting people to think about how complicated human development is. You know, people often want really simple answers to complicated questions. So they'll say things like, well, why do people do drugs? Well, you know, if there was one reason why people did drugs, we would have solved that problem by now, right? Clearly, there's a much more complicated answer, and it's going to be different reasons for different people. So the nice part about this theory is it helps us to think about the different types of influences on human behavior. So this is the graphic that is in your book. And the idea behind Bronfenbrenner's theory is that it's a bunch of layers. You start with the person at the middle, and you kind of go from the more immediate context out to the bigger picture. So in the very middle, we do have the individual themselves, you know, their age, their sex, do they have any special needs, anything like that. But then we get to what's really usually listed as the first level of his theory, which is the microsystem. And these are your immediate environments. So for a child, this could be their school, their peers, their family. So who do they live with or interact with? What is their relationship with those people? You know, do they have a good relationship with their parents or a bad relationship? You know, were the children wanted? Is the family feeling stressed out by money? Are the parents fighting? Something like that. And then for adults, you know, this class could be part of your microsystem. Your job would be part of your microsystem. The place where you live would be part of your microsystem. And then from there, we go to the mesosystem, which isn't really defined in this graphic. But the mesosystem is just the relationship between your different microsystems. So for example, for a child, it might be the relationship between family and school. So do the parents get along with the teacher? Do they trust the teacher? You know, do they feel comfortable going to the teacher if there is a problem? Issues between where the kid lives and their family. Okay, so if they live in an unsafe area, how does this maybe affect the rules that their parents are setting for them? Okay, so that's the mesosystem. The exosystem gets a little more complicated. Okay, this is now a link between two settings. One is one that you have an immediate role in, and one is a setting that you don't. So do the parents, maybe the relationship, say, between the parent's job and the kid's school. Okay, if the parents have really fluctuating work hours or have to work very long hours, the child is not directly involved in the parent's workplace, but this will affect things like whether the parents are able to volunteer in the kid's school. Okay. The Anne Arundel Community College Board of Trustees would be an example of an exosystem for you. Most of you have probably never met the trustees, but they do affect your immediate environments because they affect things like your tuition and fees, who we're going to hire, they determine college policies, things like that. So that's your exosystem. Okay. This is also where we can get into things like the availability of health care. Okay, so, and that's an example of something that can, healthcare is an example of something that can relate to multiple levels, right? So there could be just the microsystem, you know, you're sick, can you get to a doctor? Exosystem would start getting more into healthcare policy and how easy it is for you to access care, and are there maybe affordable clinics for people and things like that. Okay. So that's your exosystem. And then finally we have your macrosystem, which is the larger cultural and social context. So this can be American culture, which we like to talk about American culture even though it's not monolithic. It can be a subculture, so the culture of a religious group, of a portion of the country. We can talk about things like urban culture versus rural culture. And this is where we can also get into, again, those kind of broad social contexts. So what is the political climate of the country, that sort of thing. So most people are not interacting day to day with their politicians, but those politicians are clearly setting this culture which is affecting the person. So we have kind of these layers that start at the middle and go out. And again, it's important to remember that a lot of times there's not a nice clear division between one layer and the next, right? So something like school, you know, in this graphic they put school as a microsystem. Well, for a child, their school that they go to is a microsystem, but the exosystem might then involve things like the school board, and the macrosystem might involve things like cultural attitudes about education and the role of public schools, and what value do we place on teachers and that sort of thing. So, you know, the graphic presents them as these nice concrete layers. It's not actually always the case. Okay. And in this course, I don't test you on you know, nice concrete divisions. I'm more looking for, use this model as a way to think about all the different types of variables that influence your development. And then finally, just to make this whole thing more complicated, we have the chronosystem. And in this graphic, it's kind of the 3D element of this image. And the chronosystem has to do with the role of time. So first of all, when events occur in a person's life. You know, we can talk about how people are typically affected by becoming parents, but that's very different if you become a parent for the first time at age 16 or age 26 or age 36. So we can look at when events occur in a person's life, and we can also look at that larger historical context. So for example, right now, the economy's not so great. I mean, it's a little better than it was a few years ago, but it's not so great. Well, somebody who is maybe 20 years old right now is going to perceive that differently and be affected by that differently than somebody who's only a preschooler right now, or somebody who is in their 40s. And so, yeah, they're affected by the economy, but they may have come of age at a time when the economy was doing much better. And so this may affect people's attitudes. This may affect their behaviors. So for example, there's some research that looks at people from different generations and how much do they save versus spend, right? So Generation Xers, so people who kind of came of age in the 80s, early 90s, are famous for overspending, right? They took on large amounts of debt. Turns out the millennials, so people who are in their teens, early 20s right now, actually tend to be much more conservative with their money. And a lot of that is probably affected by the economic context. So I hope that this has given you a good overview of Bronfenbrenner's theory. As always, please, please, please ask if you have any questions. And in the meantime, I hope you all have a great day.
We have come to the end of our presentation for today. Thank you so much for listening. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me and ask me. Also remember to read Chapter 1 in your textbook for clarification. Thank you and continue to have a good day.